Most of us think that big decisions should be made with logic, spreadsheets, and pros and cons lists. But what if there's another source of information that we've been taught to ignore? Welcome to How to Be a Person, a podcast about life, with me, your host, Giuliano. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining me today. How's it going?
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in having a conversation. So I would love for you to, if you could, for me and for people listening, to introduce yourself, tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. My name is Stephanie Peirolo. I always like to say that because I've got that Italian thicket of vowels in my last name. I worked for a long time in technology and advertising, primarily in like a business development role. I got into that business because I was a single mom with two little kids. And when you're out doing outside sales, it's easy to sneak away and go to, like a T-ball game when you need to. And did pretty well in it. It's a very specific set of skills and few people are good at it, but it's very stressful, a lot of adrenaline. And so when I was in my 40s, I decided, I want to do some kind of a career change. I don't know what it's going to be. So I went to graduate school. I got a degree in transformational leadership, started consulting in kind of a like growth mindset with different companies. And one of my clients, who was a woman who ran an advertising agency, quite a large advertising agency in the Seattle area where I live, pulled me aside and said, I need an executive coach, and it's going to be you because you're the only woman I know who ran an ad agency who is in the consulting field. And I was like, oh, okay. So I have been an executive coach for a decade. And what came up a lot, particularly around the pandemic, is more and more of my executive clients started asking me about how they could make decisions. Right? Decisions about work, decisions about their career, personal decisions. And I have a decision-making practice that's based on the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. It's super Catholic. It's super in-depth. I did it when I was in my 30s, but it's a fantastic template. And so as I tried over the years to explain some of the principles of that to friends who are not religious or clients where obviously we're not talking about spirituality.
Yeah.
I was really stuck. And so, but people kept saying, wait, tell me more about that. Tell me more. I want more about what, like, you obviously are referring to a robust framework. What is it? And I realized that I had a framework. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. And one of the concepts that came about in kind of early 12-step programs, when AA started, it was an explicitly Christian program. And a lot of people came in and said, so we'd like to not die of alcoholism, but we don't believe in God, or we don't believe in, like your particular version. And so the early members of Alcoholics Anonymous sort of came up with a different idea, which is believe whatever you want, as long as it's not you. Call it a higher power, nature, divine, what, we don't care. It's immaterial. And I always thought that was a really interesting concept, right? To have something so personalized. And I thought to myself, what if I took these super Catholic, exercises of Ignatius of Loyola, put that through this more open kind of spiritual, but not religious or even just intentional framework. And people really liked it. My clients liked it. I was doing it with friends. And so after test driving it for a while, I wrote it down and it got published. My publishers in London were like, this is cool. So it's called The Saint and the Drunk, A Guide to Making the Big Decisions in Your Life. And it really is a workbook where I explain the concept of discernment, the concept of a higher power. And then I just go through what I've learned taking people through this material for years now. For example, like some of the techniques that work, some of the challenges that can arise. And then a big section of the book is about kind of the stories we tell ourselves or that we have been told by our families or cultures and ways in which we can navigate some of those narratives.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm curious a little bit about in the beginning of your story when you said that you were doing business development, right? Sorry, I know we're jumping backwards here, but we kind of covered a lot, so I kind of want to dig in a little bit. As far as like the beginning of your story, like you said, when you started in business development, outside sales, for someone who doesn't know exactly what that is, can you explain a little more?
Sure. And business development, it is sales, right? It's just a kind of fancier way of saying bigger, longer term sales cycles. So I actually started out as a journalist and I couldn't
Mm,
support my kids, again, single mom. So I moved into ad sales, right? Which is a great place to start for any kind of sales job because you are selling 30-second blocks of nothing,
mm.
right? They call it airtime because you're selling nothing, right? And
Yeah.
I, was really young, working straight commission, which is, it's a little nerve wracking.
Oh,
And so
for
I
sure.
learned real sort of sales basics.
Mm,
And then over some time, I started to call on clients who were advertising agencies. And one of my clients said, why don't you come here and sell our services? You will not make as much money, but you get to wear blue jeans to work and hang out with creative people. Right.
mm,
And I am a writer. I have always been writing fiction. And I was like, oh, that sounds better than working at the TV station
mm,
where I was at the time. So business development, and I've done it for technology companies as well as advertising agencies. It's taking a fairly complex product or service and selling it. Usually these are, multi-million dollar, pretty high ticket items, and doing a kind of a consultative sale. Like you come
mm,
in and I understand what I'm doing. I understand your industry. Let me tell you how my complex offering is going to solve your business needs. And it's a really interesting combination of, you have to know how to sell. I was usually working in very male dominated organizations, which worked for me and against me as a woman, particularly when I
mm,
was younger. People don't expect women, particularly younger women, to be tough negotiators.
mm.
And I am a very tough negotiator. I'm really tall. I'm like almost 6 feet tall. So
Okay.
when I'd go into a tough negotiation in person, I would wear like 3-inch heels.
Mm.
And I come in as like 6'3", and I'm very Italian, and people are like, "Well, you're frightening me." And it was really interesting. And it also, the idea was, if you are good at business development, your income can do a real hockey stick move,
Mm.
which was what I needed. Again, single
Yeah.
mom, and so that was what I did. You also work in, especially with an advertising agency. They still do this, which is kind of crazy. But like when I started, you would give away work for free in a coordinated effort that was almost like producing a Broadway show.
Okay.
Right. So one time we pitched an automaker. I won't say the name. And everybody wants cars because they spend a lot of money. Right. And so we were trying to get these cars to come to this big agency in Seattle. And so my job was to run the pitch, put together everything, and then figure out how to put a car on the roof. True story. It's like, all right, we got to get a crane. We got to get permission from the city of Seattle, but do
Yeah.
we? And so there were a lot of those kinds of things, which make great stories,
Mm.
but it's a really challenging. I mean, there were many times where I worked 24 hours straight. Like
Wow.
literally, like who on the team needs to go home and take a shower because they have to present later.
Wow.
And so exciting, creative, learned a lot, learned about these different businesses, but also exhausting.
Yeah. Is that at what point? Because I know you mentioned you were, your addiction. Was that during this that you kind of fell into that, or what was it?
No, it was actually really funny. I started drinking when I was very young. My dad got really sick when I was a teenager,
Okay.
and he died when I was 19. And
Mm.
so I think kind of my way of dealing with that was I just drank. And so
Mm.
I was an alcoholic really young and got in trouble when I was a teenager. And so I got sober in my 20s. So I got sober like before I had a career, oddly,
Interesting.
which
Interesting.
thank God, because there's no way I could have had a career in particularly advertising. I mean, to this, it's a little bit better now, but like the entire time I was in the industry, there were, kegs on tap in the kitchen, all day, every day.
Mm.
Right? I mean, your gift at the Christmas party was a flask full of whatever the beverage was.
Yeah.
Really heavy, heavy drinking environments. And, it was really challenging to me to be the one who wasn't drinking, especially because I wasn't trying to tell everybody why, because
Yeah.
people have narratives about that.
Sure.
And, but at the same time, there was also an advantage in that I was always the designated driver. And people would get drunk and tell me stuff, and I'd be like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, let me tell you that. I'd be like, okay. And then also what happened over time is people came to understand why I didn't drink. When they had a problem with drugs or alcohol, sometimes they would talk to me about it. And then it's also funny, like the people that I've run into, who are also in recovery, there's a sort of bond, right?
Yeah, of course.
There's sort of a connection when you've gone through something like that. So, I mean, I've been sober 37 years. So I mean, it's basically my entire adult life.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine having the career that I've had and still drinking or using.
Yeah. 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 I agree with what you said. I think, it's funny because I've had a lot of different experiences in my life, some really great and some really not great. And I think you get to a point where you almost have to appreciate all of it, because there's always, like, it's such a cliche thing to say there's always a silver lining, but there is, like even what you were saying, how like there were certain, good things because of it. And then also that like you can relate to people and connect with people because of it. And I found that to be the case for me as well. One thing I'm wondering about, because it was, it was so long ago, but when you were drinking, when you were in the middle of that, would you say that you were drinking, and, in addiction because of your feelings or because you were avoiding your feelings?
I mean, that I definitely was using it as medicine to not feel, right? For sure. I mean, it was a really stressful time. And it was also, I didn't really have a lot of coping mechanisms, right? Like I didn't know how to deal with grief or fear or whatever was coming up for me. It was hard for me to regulate my own emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I ended up doing was using alcohol to regulate my emotions, right? And it was readily available to me. I didn't do drugs as much because I didn't know where to find them, and I could, find alcohol pretty easily.
Yeah.
So it was always, and I think too, just I don't know if there's a addictive personality or not. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I do notice that, like, there's a saying, if a little is good, more is better. And every alcoholic I know is like, yeah. And, for some people, it's like, if a little is good, more is better is not their like dictum, right? Like I go to places, I'll go to parties and watch someone have a glass of wine and like drink half of it. And I'm like, what is your problem? Even all these years later, right?
Yeah,
or someone who's like, oh, no, I don't want another cocktail. I'm starting to feel it. I'm like, what is
like,
that?
Isn't
Not
that
the point? Like I remember a friend of mine who I had been sober for about 10 years at the time. He said, yeah, but don't you miss the taste? I was like, it was never about the taste.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly had beverages that were tasty, but that wasn't the plan, but I think everyone's experience of alcoholism or addiction is unique to them, right? I mean, I guess in a way I was fortunate in that I never drank normally. From the time I was 12 years old, I never drank normally. And so it was pretty obvious right away that I had a problem. But for a lot of people, that's not their path.
I see what you're saying. Like on a regular, but just normal, just drinking on a regular basis. And so it's hard to identify that there's actually an issue there.
Right.
I see. If you're enjoying the show and want to support, go to howtobeaperson.co and click support the show. The more support the show gets, the more episodes can be produced. Yeah. So, okay. So now let's fast forward. Okay, we're past all of that. We're past the business development stuff, all of that for years, and then you move into executive coaching. I'm curious because I'm not Catholic. I don't have any connection to Catholicism, so I don't really know. Like when you mentioned the saint and all that stuff, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, and I'm sure there's other people listening who don't know either. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I can tell you a little bit about at least what interested me about
Okay.
it, right? So the saint and the drunk. The saint is Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and he lived in the 1500s. He was a mercenary, right? That was his. He got paid to go to war, and
Okay.
he was very injured. He injured both of his legs, and he decided he wanted to be able to continue to fight. So he had a bunch of surgeries and went to recuperate in his family's castle in Spain, which meant he spent a really long time lying in bed with very little reading material.
Mm.
And he had some religious works. I think it was like books of the saints or something. And it occurred to him, like, maybe I should be a priest, but I also like being a mercenary. And so what he did with all that time on his hands is he started to use his imagination. And he would use his imagination in a very specific way where he would imagine his body going through the day as a mercenary.
Okay.
Like, what does it feel like? What does it smell like? You know, he goes and the lady that he's fighting for gives him her handkerchief as a favor. What does that feel like as he tucks it into his, like shirt? And really thinking about it because he had a lot of time on his hands. And then he would think, how does that feel for me? Right? So he'd do his imagination exercise on being a mercenary and he'd feel really good. And then he'd not feel good. Then he would do the same exercise and imagine he was a priest in that same like embodied way. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does the church sound like around me? And he found that he felt good and he just kept feeling good in this really sustained way. And so that he decided to become a priest. He had those kind of techniques. And as he became a priest, he kept building on ways to decide, right? And he has a whole bunch of ways to decide.
Okay.
And he was an older man when he went to seminary because he had been a warrior for so long. So he was going to, learn how to be a priest with younger men. And they said to him, how do you make decisions? What are you doing over there with your meditation and stuff? And so he explained it and he wrote it down for them very specifically. I mean, if you actually ever read the spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola, it is funny to me how granular he is. Here's when you pray, here's what you say, here's what you eat, here's what you don't eat. He's really specific.
Okay.
But it was very effective for a lot of these young men. And they ended up becoming the foundation of what's now called the Jesuit Order or the Society of Jesus, who not coincidentally are known as an order of priests who are rebels and rabble rousers. Because the idea is if you listen to yourself deeply, then you are more likely to push back against authority. Right? And so those exercises was something called discernment. And discernment was used for, centuries as a way for people to decide whether or not they wanted to become priests or nuns or monks. And then other people started recognizing, like, wait a minute, I want an internal compass to decide the important things in my life. And I'm never going to be a monk. And so more Catholics started using it. There became a whole movement where people started using it. More Christians started using it. And there's different ways to do it. Usually people go into like a retreat of some kind. I did it the old school way, which takes 9 months and you pray for an hour every day. Like, it's intense.
Okay.
And it really did change how I make decisions in a really fundamental way. That's very subtle, right? And it was super useful to me. But again, hard to translate outside of that kind of very specific Christian context, because what you do is you do this meditation, this kind of meditation of the senses, and you put yourself in Ignatius's world, you put yourself in Bible stories. Well, if you don't read the Bible, it's not going to be resonant. So what
Yeah.
I said one time to a friend where I got this idea, she was trying to decide whether she wanted to stay in her job at an advertising agency as a producer, or if she wanted to go out on her own and be a photographer.
Okay.
And I said, imagine yourself in each life. Spend 20 minutes in the quiet. Picture you get up, you go to work, you're a photographer. What's your day look like? How do you feel going through that day? Now do the same exercise. How do you feel going to your ad agency job? And she quit her job and became a photographer and is doing it still. And she found that to be really useful. Now, there's a whole bunch of different tools that I talk about in the book, but I
Yeah.
think just culturally, we have become so attached to a rational way of making decisions.
Yeah.
Pros and cons list. Does this make sense? Are you gonna, like that we forget the part about like we live in bodies. We have dreams, we have desires. There's certain things we're drawn to. Not everything that we are called to is rational. But at the same time, we also live in a world of realities, right? So when I would read books about career decisions, when I was making career decisions, a lot of the books were kind of like, manifest your reality, build your dreams. And I'm like, listen, friend, I am working 3 jobs to support 2 children by myself. I am not going to manifest a reality in which I get to go to graduate school and not bring in income for 2 years. Right? That is not a reality. And so one of the things my book does and my process is to stay very grounded in reality.
Okay.
Like there's a section in the workbook that says, write down your real responsibilities, right? If you are a caregiver, you can't move across the country for a job if you are caring for an elderly parent that needs specialized care in your town, right? Period. You may have financial obligations. So the idea is it's not dream your best dream and live your best life. It's how do you figure out the intersection of your very real responsibilities, what it is you're called to do, and things that may be blocking you. And it's a complicated process, right? Like this is not I'm going to spend 20 minutes or, 2 weeks on this and I'm going to have all the answers. It is a kind of painstaking process. But if you are deciding whether or not to marry a particular person, what kind of career path you want to follow, if you are going to have a child or not, like these are big decisions. And it is useful, I find, for people to have a framework to make them that says, hey, your intellect is important, but so is your heart. You might have some narratives that are holding you back. So let's just take a beat and really think things through in an embodied, intentional way.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like a combination between, because obviously you said a lot of people rely on rationality and logic and reason, but there is also this other side of things with intuition and your emotions and what feels right. And it sounds like kind of like a marriage between the two.
Well, and it's trying to navigate them. And I think for a lot of people, there's another part of that braid, which is what I call intention.
Okay.
Right. So there are a lot of people who have a real deep sense of calling, but they don't have language for it. Right. So like this is the first book that I've had published by a publisher, but I have always been a writer. I have had a calling to write. There are people who wake up and feel very strongly that they want to help their community or that they want to teach young people because they had a teacher, right? And I think of that sense of mission, calling, intention as being deeply spiritual, but for people who are not spiritual, they often don't have language for it. So one of my clients was a CEO who I did some of this early work with before I wrote the book is an atheist, but deeply committed to making the world a better place through the kind of work that he did. And I won't name what that was, but it would be obvious if I said it. He was one of the more spiritual people that I've taken this through, but he didn't identify it as spiritual. He just wanted to make the world a better place and had devoted his entire life to doing that. And so that's really what I was trying to be able to make space for, is people who have a calling, a need, a desire, an intention. That is important, even if it is impractical. Like, we all know, I'm sure I have a lot of friends who are teachers. They could make a lot more money doing something else. But the financial part is not why they chose that career. It's not what gives them satisfaction. It's not why they're here. Right?
So in talking about this, I remember one of the things that I read about you when it came to this process was talking about the genius of the body. Can you explain that a little?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different kind of approaches, what I call channels, that I suggest to people, because not everything is going to work for everyone. Right.
Okay.
So the genius of the body is really based in a kind of a sense of somatic wisdom. Right. And I'll say up front that for some people, this is not a channel that's open to them. People who have chronic pain, who might have had some kind of trauma, sexual assault. This may not be your channel. That's okay. I'll talk about another one that might work for you. So just to say that. But for a lot of us, and I think particularly women, we have a awareness, we have information that comes from our body. And I think all of us, regardless of gender or background, have this. So think about, have you ever met somebody and just like felt like drawn to them by something physical? Like, think about holding a newborn baby. Most people, when they hold a newborn baby, their new niece or whatever, they do this. They smell the baby's head. Because there's something about the smell of a new baby and the way it like cuddles up in your, under your chin, that our body reacts to. We're wired that way as a species, right? And sometimes we have an understanding in our body before we have it in our mind. Right. So I'm sure a lot of us have had, I had this experience once at work where I met a man who was at my job, and I had an incredibly negative feeling about him. There's no reason. There was nothing about, I just, it's like, again, that intuition, that sort of gut instinct. And a lot of times we ignore that because we are told, depending on our culture, it's not real, it's not rational. And what I try to do is to get people, if you have access to that channel, go for it. And I have exercises to invite people to kind of tune into that. One of the things that I talk about is being aware of what happens when you move your body, right? So try to exercise without noise, right? No music, no podcasts, whether it's walk, Tai Chi. I like to swim. And what I find is sometimes I'll get into the pool in one frame of mind, and I'll get out of the pool and like emotions just come up. Like, I'm swimming, everything's fine. Then suddenly I'm super angry, or some grief might come up. And to just stop and be like, well, hello there. That's interesting. And really recognizing that we can hold things in our body, good and bad, right? And it can be the most unlikely things. It could be dance. It could be sex. It could be any experience where your body gets to be more in the forefront. And I think for a lot of us, like, one of the experiences that I know that for a lot of women, we are told to discount our physical experiences. Women, particularly Black women, go into the doctor and say they're having pain, and they get an Advil, whereas a white man is going to get a Percocet, right? And so we have all these messages discounting our body as a reliable source of information. So some of us, it's like, some people I explain this concept to, they're like, oh yeah, totally get that. Other people are like, how do I find that? And so I say, like, take a sense a day and just play with your senses. Like, eat and drink your favorite foods and beverages and really savor them, right? For touch, wear clothes that are like super soft, just like try to play with your senses and tune into that that channel because there is an opportunity for wisdom there.
Interesting. If you're enjoying the show, I think you'll love my book by the same name, How to Be a Person, 100 Gems on Living a Good Life, available now on Amazon. And so just so I understand then, when you're talking about the genius of the body, the somatic wisdom, is it something that is purely instinctual? Is it something that is situational? Is it something, and I'm asking what you believe, is it some sort of higher, wisdom? What is it?
It can be any of those things. I mean, it's very individual, but I think of it as it's almost like a skill that you can build, right? Like for anyone that's ever started that has a meditation practice, right? Like I've had a meditation practice, almost daily meditation for 20 years. When I first started, I was terrible at meditation. I couldn't even sit still for 3 minutes. Right now, I'm better because I've been doing it for 20 years. And so you can think about tuning into the wisdom of your body as a sort of practice, right? And if the analogy is a spiritual practice, that's fine. If the analogy is more of like a meditative or even a physical practice, lifting weights or learning how to surf. I think the idea is that, so I'm gonna talk about another channel because this might be a way to understand this better. So another channel that people can use if the body is difficult for them is called attraction and aversion. We all know what attraction is. You are drawn to someone, right? Like you're at a party, you see someone across the way and you're like, oh, that person is so beautiful, or I want to meet them, I want to date them, right? We're used to attraction. What we don't tend to pay attention to in our culture is aversion, a sense of like, ew, right? That's not for me. And it is useful. That is also a really useful channel because what we don't want is as informative as what we want. And a lot of times, again, we are told, it's too negative, it's too judgmental, you shouldn't be, that kind of thing, right? And so, an example that I use as a young friend of mine was planning a wedding. And she was in that time of life where she went to a bunch of weddings. And she would come back from the weddings and she would have this list of all the things she hated about the weddings. I can't believe they did this. And then they did this stupid thing. And then this is dumb. But that was, she planned her wedding using aversion. Looking at all, and I'm sure, people could have said, oh, you're being judgmental or you're being too negative. She wasn't telling her friends, but the idea of like, she used aversion to say, this is not happening at my wedding. And she had a beautiful wedding, right? Yeah. And so a lot of us are told, oh, that's negative, that's judgy, that's bad. And it's really useful, right? And so one of the examples that I use is, so, again, since I use the baby example, if a woman is trying to decide whether or not she wants to have a child, her partner wants a child, she's not sure. If she goes to visit her sister who has just had a baby, an attraction reaction, physically, intellectually, emotionally, would be for her to be really drawn to holding the baby, the smell of the baby, the imagining like what it must be like to bring a new life into the world. Positive, positive, positive. We know those, right?
Yeah.
She could also have a reaction that is in her body and in her mind really negative. Like, oh my God, this whole apartment smells like poopy diapers. Like looking at her sister's body and thinking, I cannot believe she had to have a C-section. That is so horrifying to me. Like all those things in her brain saying, get me out of here.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I will take people through this content in retreats, right? And I did a retreat. It was a large group of women from like 20 to 80. And when I used that example, they had a really hard time with me using an example of a woman having an aversion reaction to having a child. Because they are so culturally steeped, particularly the older women. And I say this as an older woman. Well, every woman wants to have a baby. And I'm like, no, this woman left her sisters as quickly as she could, went home, put on her running shoes, and ran 5 miles, and became really clear that she is never going to carry a child.
Mm.
Nothing about it is going to be part of her life. And there was a lot of resistance from the older women in the group. Like literally, they're like, she just hasn't met the right guy. Like, no. But I think that's what people experience culturally. Right? Like if they walk into a job that they've been told they should be doing, someone who has spent his whole life having his parents tell him that the only viable career is as a doctor. And he walks into a hospital in medical school and every cell of his body recoils. It's going to be hard for him to honor that. Right. And so the idea of attraction and aversion can often live in our bodies. And often it is right. But we're taught to make, if it's not rational.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I think that part of the reason why I ask, and I'm kind of digging around this a little bit, is because I feel like the more I learn about like just different theories about life and how to make decisions and like what path to go down and all these things, the more I realize that it's almost as if we already know the answers.
Yes.
Right. It's like you already know, but you're not willing to admit it. And what I like is that it seems like a lot of these channels are kind of like a way for you to be able to like see what that answer is very clearly, because we're so used to like shoving down the answers because we have to use logic and we have to use rationality and all of that.
But yes and no. I would invite you to reframe your narrative around the fact that we know and we don't want to, or we are rejecting that knowledge.
Okay.
So we have an entire system that is arrayed against us tuning into our internal wisdom. Right. And so there's a couple ways this happens. One is if you look at patriarchy and late stage capitalism want us to not be tuned into our own understanding. Right. The primacy of rational thought was used as a way of oppressing women who tend to have a more embodied wisdom and understanding. Women were not considered to be rational. Therefore, they couldn't be in positions of leadership or power, right? That's a really old, prominent trope, right?
Yeah.
Also, the same thing of capitalism. We want, the capitalist system wants us to be workers and consumers. They don't want us tapping into what we know. So I think that, yes, for some people, they might resist their internal knowing, but there's a whole world that says your internal knowing is wrong. Let me give you something else. So here's an example. So I do say everybody knows what's best for them. We all have that knowing. It is obscured in some way. So the example that I use is, I'm in Seattle. It's a sunny day. I look out my window and I can see the sun because the blinds are up and the window is clean. That is my knowing. That is my connection to what it is that I am called to do. For a lot of us, the window's dirty, the blinds are drawn, and we need to do some work to connect to it. If my windows were down right now, if my blinds were down, the sun would still exist.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I really believe each one of us has access to this inner knowing, and the thing is, it's dangerous because I could get access to people get access to an inner knowing, and a lot of them say, like I did, this corporate career is not what I want to do.
Yeah. Some
people get access to an inner knowing and say, I might have been married to this person for 20 years, but I don't want to live like this anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Or yes, I know that my parents told me that I had to be an engineer, but I don't want to be an engineer. I want to be a nurse. Right. And so access to your inner knowing and living out your truth can often upset all of the structures around you. And so I think it's really important. And then also there are a lot, and I say this totally mindfully. I am a person who has written a book and I am selling a book. You can go to my website and pay for classes and, personal coaching from me for real. Right. But you can also go to my Substack, which is free, and read all of this stuff too, because there are a lot of people who say falsely, here's my 3-step program, pay me $20,000, go to this long weekend, and all of this stuff will magically happen because it's a good sales pitch, right? And what I feel like I'm trying to say is, of course I'm selling a book, but the idea is like, all this stuff is available. If this is a vector to do this, and the $15 you spend on my book helps you, fabulous, right? And then we're done. You don't need an upsell. You don't need a refresher, right? You don't need, and you can get it out of the library. And so it's, I think, also recognizing the kind of profit motive that a lot of people who are in the same world that I play in, right? There's a lot of self-help people who have made a lot of money by telling people that they're broken and that they need to spend X, Y, or Z to make them be fixed and happy and fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to get some clarification on, because what I shared before, you said, well, I encourage you to look at it this way. I feel like what you described was what I was thinking. So I was like, wait, what is the difference between what I was saying and versus what you said? Because I want to know, I want to understand.
What I heard, and I didn't write it down.
It's okay.
But what I took from what you said is that sometimes we have an inner knowing, and we will reject it. Right?
Okay.
Which is true. But for most of us, we can't even tune into our inner knowing to reject it.
Oh,
right? And I feel like the challenge is there's a lot of shame that is directed at people, especially people who realize later on in life that they want a different career, a different marriage, or a different life, or they come out as gay or trans or whatever. Changing your mind and being true to yourself is often fraught with a lot of judgment.
Oh, yeah.
And and I just want to name to people that sometimes you can't tap into that because nobody ever taught you how. And that, yes, there are people who have a clear sense of their inner knowing and choose not to access it, and that is absolutely possible. Yeah. But I also, I get very uncomfortable with people who say, if you are unhappy, it is your fault. If you are not understanding your true calling, it's your fault. Because often these things are part of a systemic framework, right? So like, as an executive coach, I look at a lot of content that is geared towards executives. And a lot of times, particularly women, are told that being burnt out is your fault. And for all the women I know and all the women that I have ever coached, being burnt out is often a product of trying to, work as a leader in a sexist environment, not getting help from the often opposite sex partner or co-parent at home. Maybe you're taking care of elderly parent. Like, there are structural and systemic reasons for burnout that are often not addressed. And it's often said to women, you're burnt out because of your personal failing. You need to go get some nice smelling candles and take a spa day. And it's like, yeah, that's not, and so I guess what I'm very alive to is we tell ourselves enough negative narratives. I don't want our moving towards a discernment journey to be burdened with, well, I should have known this 10 years ago. Does that?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I think that's always a thought that comes through my mind too, when I, talk about things about improving your life and whatever, because I do think that personal responsibility is super important, but I'm also not oblivious to the fact of everything you just described, right? That there are certain things that are and systems that are in place that work against us, right? Like that is very obvious, but also at the same time, right, there has to be a certain amount of personal responsibility and recognition that, like, well, hey, despite all of those things, I still have to take responsibility and do what I would need to do if I want to continue, if I want to move in the right direction,
Yes. Well, and a concept that I think is, so discernment is consistent, and it's not just making the one decision, right? So one of the things that I talk about is it's important to honor resistance.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought it up.
Culturally, we are told, no pain, no gain, push through the pain.
Yeah.
Which is I don't like that. I don't like that
Oh, me too.
narrative.
I hate it so
Yeah.
much.
And so I think what I talk about is, if you feel resistance, like, I don't want to do this, I need to step
Yeah.
away from this, honor it
Yeah.
and get curious about it and have a little mini discernment process. Like, I have a
Mm.
section in the book that talks about what is the difference if you're reading this book and you can't get through it. How do you know what's procrastination? And how do you know
Mm.
what is a resistance that is valid that you should honor?
Okay.
And the first step is realizing there is resistance which you should honor. Right? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sayings. There's saying of like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, sometimes the student isn't ready and she just needs to sit herself down and rest. So she will be ready.
Mm.
That there's been a lot of times where I've taken people through this content, or I've been going through the content, and I'm just like, I just feel a block. Like, I can't do this right now. Like, I have a chapter in there about going through a decision making process if you have experienced bereavement or loss. Right? I lost my son when he was a teenager.
Okay.
And, I think it was important for me to learn in my grieving process, when there was resistance, it's okay to sit down. It's okay to be like, you know what? I am not, this is a resistance that says this is too tender. I'm too tired. I can't
Mm.
talk about this right now. And I need to give myself permission to honor that. And then there are resistances that are like, you know what? I don't want to do this emotional hard work, or I really wish somebody else would come and do this hard job, but nobody seems to be doing it. Right.
Mm.
And so as we become curious about our inner workings, the hope is to have a framework. Like, my hope is, if honoring resistance is a new concept to anyone who's listening, my hope is the next time they experience resistance, they take a beat and they're like, wait, this resistance could be valid. It could be a sign to me to honor this and rest or change or stop or whatever I need to do. Or it might be my procrastination, which I know is a thing.
Yeah. If you've ever thought about writing a book, Peaceful Profits can help you go from idea to published author, and even position your book to become a bestseller. Go to howtobeaperson.co and click Peaceful Profits Author Resource to get more information now. That makes so much sense. It's funny. There's actually a perfect example of this. My wife and I, I'll keep it vague on purpose, but we were paying for a specific like coaching program, and we were really excited about it when we got into it. And we're like 2 months in, and we like haven't done anything they've told us to do. And it's really expensive. And we're like, we need to stop because we're not even doing what they're telling us to do. But over the years, we've become like different people, right? Where like in the past, I feel like I would have beaten myself up. I'm like, oh my God, we spent this money and we're not even doing anything they're saying. Like, God, why don't we do what we say we're going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Instead of, I was like, what is the resistance here? And that's funny because that's the exact word I used. I was like, what is this resistance that I'm feeling here? Like, why is it that we went into this and we were all excited, and now we're just like super, like, we're not doing any of the things they're telling us to do. Like, and it's not in a argumentative way, but just in like weren't doing it. And anyway, we ended up having the discussion and decided, okay, we need to stop this because we had to, like you said, honor the resistance. But it is really interesting because I think that just kind of explaining what I was saying before about how I would have handled things in the past and how I did handle things even, before we were married and when I was single, is like, it feels like the default is what you were saying before, that like you're deficient in some way. Right. If you're not doing something you said you were going to do, or if you're not doing things the way that it's expected, there's some sort of deficiency in yourself that you need to make up for, and you need to figure it out, and you need to push through it, and other people push through it. So you should push through it too. And you should be able to, instead of recognizing, okay, maybe, right? Actually, maybe, right? Maybe I do need to, but also, is there a possibility that maybe this just isn't the right path for me? And I need to be able to acknowledge that.
Well, and I think it's also, in circumstances where people are looking at a program or a coach or, some sort of educational series, what I try to look at is something that allows you to leave right? Like every contract that I have,
Mm,
unless it's for like a big event, every contract that I has, anybody can leave for any reason a month out,
mm.
right? Because I want that to be
Yes.
like, I want to respect the fact that people get to change. And
Yeah.
then also, like when I'm working with clients, I will frequently say, especially as I'm getting to know them, does this resonate? Is this helpful? And I pause and let them answer the question. And so I think the idea of like any self-improvement, personal growth, discovery, learning opportunity that you're going to have, I would advise you to make sure that there is space for you to go at your own pace, right? Like, so in my
Mm.
book, I say throughout the book, read this book however you want to. If there's 2 chapters that interest you, go to those 2 chapters and skip the rest of the book. Put it down on the shelf for 2 years if it's not like, the whole point of the book is to get you to listen to you telling you how you want to be engaged with the book,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think anything you're doing, right, I don't care what it is, I would advise you, especially before you pay any money, to look at, is there flexibility for me to be in a discernment process as I engage with this content?
Mm.
Right? Is there a way for me to gracefully exit in a way that makes sense for everybody financially? Or is somebody saying you have to, you have to sign up for this, so you have to, you know what I mean? And because I think the intention there is important, because what it does is, if it's orienting around your capacity, ability, and resonance with the material in a way that allows you to come or go.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I actually appreciate that too, because I feel like I've had similar thoughts in the past and I haven't like crystallized it. So I appreciate you saying it out loud, because I've put together offers as well. And so thinking, oh yeah, I want to make sure people have that opportunity, because it's not just, I mean, just like you said, right? You're in the space as well. Like, of course I want to make money, but I don't want to do it at the expense of someone else's like destiny, right? And like the path that they're on, it's like, I
Right.
want people to be able to, like you said, work through whatever, like the way you describe it as discernment, right? And
Right.
for me, I know like I look back on my life, and like when you were talking about the like the social cost of changing your mind, I've experienced that so many times in my life. I've made so many decisions that I can't tell you how many people that knew me were just like, what are you doing, dude? Like, this is
Right.
crazy. And my point is that I get that, right? The whole idea of changing your mind. And I feel like I want to make sure people have the space, people that interact with me and people that pay me personally and professionally, right? That people
Right.
have, that I give people the space to be able to change their mind.
Absolutely. And I think there's also, I just want to name that there is a, for lack of a better word, spiritual and psychic cost to not changing your mind and living your
Mm,
truth. Right. I mean, it's pretty significant.
yeah.
And, and I think that you should also, if you are considering something and worried about the social cost of change or the pushback from some people in your life, to really think of it as like, you only get one turnaround,
Yeah.
most people think.
Yeah.
And how do you want to spend that time? And then also thinking about like, what is it that you're teaching the people around you? I mean, like a lot of times I end up talking with women who are in their like 30s and 40s, and they're curious about like, I'm sort of an anomaly. I'm 63 years old, just published a book, working, doing interesting and engaging things. And part of the reason I do that is my, 83, 88, anyway, my aunt who is in her 80s is thinking she might retire this year. Right. And so what I have done is I have women in my family who have lived really interesting, engaging lives. They do work that has value to them. They're involved in their community. They're active, and they have like, they are showing me how to age.
Mm,
Right? And so I am showing my daughter how to age. I am showing my grandchildren how to age. And so the idea of like, when you free yourself to live the life you feel like you are meant to live, you are also giving permission to everyone around you
mm,
to live the life they want to live.
yeah. That's a beautiful way to put it. I think, yeah, it's funny. I never really looked at it like that, but it's so true. I have had a couple of friends over the years point that out to me, and I think it's something I haven't like just taken on because I've always just like I don't know whatever. But I have had friends say stuff like that to me, like, "Man, you always just do what you want. Like I don't understand how you do that, you know?"
Right.
And yeah, it's kind of an interesting perspective to look at it, that like not only like, right, a lot of times when you're making decisions, if you're thinking about what other people are going to think, you're always thinking negatively, right? Like, oh no,
Right.
are they going to judge me for this? But it's also like, well, wait a second. On top of course making the right decision for me, is there a positive effect that this can have on the people that I'm thinking are going to judge me, that maybe it actually have a positive effect on them? And what could
Right.
that be? Just like there's that saying that's like, if you're going to overthink, at least also think about all the good things that could happen too.
Right.
And so it's kind of the same concept just applied in this scenario.
Well, and you used an important word that I just want to highlight. You said you do what you want. And again, in some of these retreats, what I'll say, people are like, what is the question I'm discerning? And I said, whatever it is, it should start with two words: I want. And people get real, like, well, I get to just, I want, like, I'm like, yeah, right now, all I want you to think, what do you want? When I say I want, what is the rest of that sentence? Own that. And a lot of women, a lot of people are
Mm,
told they don't get to just, I want. But I think it is important to own what you want. You may not get it. You may not get everything associated with that, but to really start with, what do I want for me in my life? What is it that is welling up inside of me that is undeniable? And once you have that, it really is, it really can be the North Star for you.
yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm curious because I feel like what I've wanted, okay, I in the past, I feel like I've had trouble making decisions as in like committing to something for an extended amount of time. But I feel like I'm very decisive in that I like make my choices very quickly, right? And then I just go do stuff. And then later I'll change my mind, but that's always when it's an issue, is like, should I change my mind? That's always what I like would like rack my brain
Right.
over stuff. But what I'm curious of is when you say, or when you're talking about like this decision making process and tapping into these channels, and then you're describing like these people not knowing what they want. Is that part of it as well? Like tapping into these channels just so you can even know what you want in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, I think that these, once you develop these skills, you can use them all the time, right? For big and little decisions. I think what comes up for me in your question is, what is your understanding of making a decision or discernment? A lot of people like to think, I make a decision, I'm either right or wrong, and that decision exists, it stays. And the reality is, we usually make decisions over and over again.
Yeah.
Right. So, you make a decision and things don't turn out the way you want. It doesn't mean it was a bad decision.
Yeah.
Like, you can decide to move to another part of the country to take a job and learn from it and meet new people and engage, and then the company folds.
Yeah.
That didn't mean your decision was bad.
Yeah.
It just didn't turn out the way that you wanted. And a lot of times I think we have trouble, and you can make a decision and then need to make another decision about that.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it's not static. And I think one of the things that's
Mhm.
challenging in developing a discernment process is that you never know for sure. Life happens,
Yeah.
and you might turn out that the decision that was right for you when you were 20 isn't right for you when you were 30. The
Mm.
decision that you thought was going to turn out one way doesn't turn out because somebody does something that's not, skillful.
Sure.
And so I think it's also understanding that having a great discernment process does not insulate you from life happening to you.
Yeah.
It just can clear away um, some of the things that can obscure your ability to navigate effectively, right? So if we
Yeah.
think of this as like a emotional GPS, if I have a GPS that's telling
Mm.
me to get from A to B, it doesn't mean there's not going to be potholes or traffic or snow. I know where I'm going. It might take me
Yep.
3 days. It might take me 30 minutes. That's really what this discernment process is. It's your GPS. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean the road's going to be smooth, but at least you know where you're going.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think too of what you were saying before about the having kids or not having kids. like, I think it's also possible that maybe it is. So like someone in that moment, they could be like, hey, yeah, I never want to have kids. But it could also just be that, hey, right now your body's like, no, I don't want this. So very, very clearly doesn't want it. And maybe that your situation does change and you do meet a different person, or your
Right.
life circumstances change and you do decide later, you do feel the attraction versus the aversion, right? You do
Right.
feel the attraction instead. And maybe then it's a different decision. But it's kind of like what you were saying, like the decision is not, like making decisions is not we consider it almost like a final thing, like done, decisions made. When in reality, that doesn't even make any sense, right? Like
Exactly.
we live in a series of moments that happen. You're like, you're going to always have to be making decisions,
Right.
And that means that even a decision you made just recently, you could be making a different decision, a very clear, different decision later,
And each one of them is valid.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Stephanie, I feel like we could talk for a while. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share that maybe we didn't cover yet?
No, I mean, I think, if these concepts are interesting to you, I would invite you to take a look at the book. It is a workbook, short chapters, journal prompts after every, section. It's also available as an audiobook for those of you that prefer that format. I voiced it and found out that I wrote a book about decision making and have trouble saying the word decision, which drove my audio engineer absolutely mad. But yeah, and then you can always get in touch with me. I'm always, speirolo.com. I'm always curious to hear what people think and how they engage. I also have a podcast on Substack that's called The Bad Boss Brief. I have a newsletter that's free that's called Fierce Grace. So there's many ways to get in touch with me or read my stuff.
That's amazing. I love it. Stephanie, thank you so much. This is a great conversation. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. It was delightful.
Thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who'd appreciate it. For everything I have to offer, visit howtobeaperson.co.